Right, so you're telling me that there's a player that on his day is one of the best right backs on the planet and we've got a chance to sign him. How do we deal with this one? Okay, so I am talking about Reece James today because reports have surfaced recently linking us again with a move for the English right back. Now, these reports are nothing new. Over the years, we've always been linked with him, and he was always viewed as the long term replacement for Danny Carvajal. However, in recent times, the reports have sat on the back burner, and that's for a couple of different reasons that we are going to explore today. So, what are we looking at here? We're looking at a player who's still in his early 20s, playing for Chelsea, one of the best. I can't even really say they're one of the best teams in the world. I'm sure they'll get back there, but if you've watched them recently, they are struggling a little bit. They're clearly going through a transition period and they're nowhere near the finished article. They are a long way away from the team that we had such battles with just a couple of seasons ago in the Champions League. But even if you cast your mind back to then, Reece James played against us and he was an absolute monster. When they came to the Bernabeu, the guy was immense. In terms of the profile of player that we'd be getting, he's a strong, powerful right back, full of running. He assists a lot of goals. He gets into very dangerous positions. He's got an incredible delivery on him, which makes him a threat from set pieces as well. And he chips in with the odd goal. It all sounds really promising. And the best thing about him, and the one thing that set him apart, was that when we talk about good right backs in the world, we have to analyse a lot of different qualities, and we tend to fixate primarily on the attacking attributes. And he's got loads of them, he's got it in abundance. But what he had was the defensive solidity as well. Because when you think about your right backs, you think about your Kyle Walker, your Danny Carvajal, your Trent Alexander Arnold, your Ashraf Hakimi. And one of the criticisms that gets levelled, particularly against the likes of Hakimi and Trent, is the lack of defensive ability. There's this perceived weakness in their game. And this is something that was never levelled at Reece James. When he came through under Frank Lampard, went straight into the team, he never looked back. He's strong in the challenge, he asserts himself, he has those one-on-ones. So it all sounded pretty incredible. And the figures that have been mentioned over the past couple of years have been as high as 80, 100 million. And at the time, he probably would have justified it. So here's where the skepticism comes in, because unfortunately, there's a little bit more to it than that. Number one, and we can't get away from this, and this is the one thing that is dominating the recent reports, and it's the one question mark that I have: his injury history. He just can't stay fit. This guy, technically, is Chelsea's club captain, but you never see him on the pitch. And when he does make his return from injury, he's gone again, almost straight away, because he's always getting injured. And he's talked about this in the past and how it affects him and how he has to battle back from his injuries. And I do feel for him, I really do. But in the cold light of day, can you afford to be dropping big money on a player with such an injury record? It's a very, very dangerous thing to do, particularly for big money. Look at what happened with Eden Hazard. And it wasn't even similar at the time because Hazard didn't even have an injury history at Chelsea. He played almost all of their games. He was very dependable. It was a different set of circumstances. He got injured badly against Paris Saint-Germain in an early game for Real Madrid, and he was never the same after that. But the point is that injuries do count, because that player who was one of the best wingers in the world at the time, frequently in the Premier League teams of the season, ripping that division to pieces, suddenly was unusable. Suddenly, when he came back, he didn't want to run at defenders the same way that he used to. He wasn't as creative. There was that fear. He did fear getting injured again. And I do feel that when you do have a record like that, it has to be on the mind. I remember Michael Owen talking about this, who, of course, had a lot of hamstring injuries. And he used to say that he'd be hesitant about the runs that he would make. And there would be times where he'd go missing in games deliberately. He'd put himself in positions where he knew that he wasn't accessible to his teammates. And he'd do it deliberately so that he didn't have to get too involved, because he didn't want to spend the time out injured. And it's kind of like a vicious circle, because we can't get away from this. Reece James, when he plays, when he's on top of his game, is a monster, an amazing fullback, but he's not there. And there are no guarantees that he'll ever be able to get back to a place where he's able to maintain that consistently. Now, you could say, let's again be devil's advocate, you could say that the same accusation could be levelled at the likes of Mondi at Real Madrid, who has got a load of injury problems over the years. You could say the same about Alphonso Davies, who does not have a good injury record at all. And one of the things that we think about when we think about those two players is that obviously Mondi's had his contract renewed. Now, the skeptic in me believes that that's to avoid him leaving on a free, which is entirely possible in the same way that Andre Lunin's contract could represent the same, so that we ensure that we get a transfer fee. But it could also be the case that they want Mondi to stick around. We know that Carlo Ancelotti is a massive supporter of him, but he also recognises the ability of, say, a Fran Garcia to influence the game, someone a little bit more attack-minded who can change the dynamic and change the way that the game is going. And if you bring in an Alphonso Davies, he's an upgrade. So maybe the thinking is that the two of them can coexist and you can manage the injuries that way because you're limiting their minutes, you're constantly changing them. Now, how this would affect the continuity in the team remains to be seen, but it can be done, and it has been done over the years. A big example that I like to use is the example of Inter Milan. Now, Inter Milan are fascinating to me because the way that they set up, they have their five across the back and they play with two up top, which is really rare to see in the modern game. Now, I talked about how this might work if you were to, say, have Kylian Mbappe and Erling Haaland. Again, fantasy league stuff, I know, but it's something to consider. But one of the things about their system is that when Inter Milan line up with those wing backs in the back five, they alternate them. In other words, they know that they'll start with two, and more often than not, if you pay attention to their games, they finish the game with a different set. They know it's coming. And the reason for this is managing the minutes, because the expectation on those two wing backs to provide width to a narrow side is huge. They have to be up and down, all game long. And it's unsustainable because aside from risking injury, you risk fatigue and you have to make the change. So maybe the system can work. Maybe a world where you've got, say, a Reece James alongside another fullback and you can be equally confident in both of their abilities, maybe that does work. Maybe that's enough for him to manage those minutes, for him to be able to say, do you know what, I can't do it today. I'll sit this one out. Because that's what Ferland Mondi is doing currently. He gave an interview a while back and he said that he's getting better at recognising his own body. He knows when something's up and he sits it out. He shuts it down perfectly fine because he's not having massive injury layouts. Touch wood. So maybe this is a problem that you can get around. But obviously we're talking about right back. That is a position where there are so many opportunities for Real Madrid. We've already discussed the fact that Trent Alexander-Arnold is out of contract next summer. The fact that Achraf Hakimi is out of contract the following summer. So he would be in the final year of his contract with Paris. If he was to say to them, I have no intention of renewing, maybe it forces their hand. Maybe they would be willing to negotiate. So he becomes an option. The point being that there are a lot of people casting for the same position. You've got Vasquez, 33 years old, and Carvajal, 32. We have to consider the future. Does Reece James' name come into the conversation? I believe it has to. Even though he's still under contract with Chelsea and it would cost a transfer fee, there has to be a part of Chelsea that doubts a little bit, even though he's club captain. And I know that he's had a great relationship with them over the years. He's Chelsea through and through. But there has to be a part of them that doubts that injury history and thinks, do you know what? We might be better cutting our losses. And that could be, their detriment could be Madrid's gain. Who knows? Personally, I would love to see how this develops. And more than anything, I'd love to see him get some minutes under his belt this season. Because when he does play, what a player. What a player he is. So I think it's one to watch, but it's one that is definitely exciting. And as we're looking this season, I do believe that the right back position is one to watch. So if you do get a chance to watch Liverpool, have a look at what Trent's doing, or on England duty, or have a look at Ashraf's games. I know it's painful watching the French league, but maybe in the Champions League, see what he's doing, because he's always pulling up trees. He's very, very consistent in what he does, and he does offer a lot to that side. He's an exciting player. Have a look and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. Take care.